Hi, I'm Terry Gibbs, and I'm here with Brian Miller. Brian's been collecting trains for decades and has invited me in to show y'all his trains. Um, and I'm sure you guys don't want to look at my face. I'm going to ask Brian some questions, and then we're going to go ahead and look at all of his wonderful trains. And he has down here is a 1949 Lionel Showroom Layout with the GG1s running underneath. And we'll look at everything we got in here. If you could only keep 5 sets, which ones would they be?
Oh my gosh. I mean, post-war or all alive?
In the post-war.
In the post-war. Well, a girl's train for sure. Probably a Canadian Pacific set, the Jersey Central FM passenger set.
So you'd be keeping the
773 passenger set. That's a hard question because there's a lot of cool stuff.
So what you'd be keeping is the premier stuff.
The premier stuff, not necessarily rare, just the desirable.
And that's why it's desirable, is because everyone wants
Everybody wants it.
How'd you start collecting sets?
I'm not sure. Just I probably saw them somewhere displayed that way, and that just interests me. Most of the collectors I know don't do that. They just have all the F3s together and all the FMs together and all the variations of the Berkshires and Alcos and whatever, and then they have maybe the cars. If they're really organized, they may have them numbered from lowest to highest. I just really like the idea of sets, and I didn't mind duplicating, having 10 or 12 of something, if it completed a set.
Well, really, if you look at it, like with those sets there, what are those, 1666s, 224s?
Straight ahead of you, those are turbines, so those are 2020 sets, 671s, 681s.
So those, when you're buying those in the 70s and the 80s, the engines are 30, 40 bucks a piece. The cars are $2 a piece.
Yep.
With a couple of odd variations.
Well, right, with the exception of maybe the electronic sets. But yeah, there are a lot of sets in here that wouldn't bring $50 in an auction. Yeah. But they're just neat because they are original sets, and usually for the most part they've been together for 70 years or 75 years or 80 years in case of some of the
And then you got all of these, those are all Berks, right?
Right, so you've got turbines, small Hudsons, Berks go all the way down the third and about halfway down to the 746s. So there's every Berkshire set that was in the catalog is on the wall. Every small Hudson set that's in the catalog was on the wall. I don't have every turbine set because in the early years they had basically 4 engines and 9 cars, and they made all these scrambles of different sets. I just don't have the space for all the duplicates.
That's the 46.
46 to 48, 49. Yeah, they just made lots and lots of sets out of minimal stuff. But when it comes to like Jeeps or FMs or F3s, all the catalog sets are here. Same with GG1s. Same with all the switcher sets. In the Alcos, there's a few Alco sets that aren't here mainly because of the same thing. By 1961, 2, 3, they were just jumbling crap together, and I've already got it in some other set. I don't need to duplicate it.
And so all these sets we're looking at, these are all, for the most part, catalog
sets. There are probably 15 or 20 uncatalogued sets in the room. You get into your, your olive drab military sets, the famous Sears set up there.
And that weird general over there.
Yeah, there's just some, the Halloween general. There's, like I say, there's 15 or 20 sets in here that are not catalog sets, they're uncatalogued sets. But I primarily focused on the catalog sets. I would have an uncatalogued set maybe because that's like, for instance, the little set from 66 up here with 364, 64 box cars, and there is a 239 Loco. You've got a Western Pacific Santa Fe and box cars and an Erie Bay window caboose. So that set's on the wall because that's the only set that the Western Pacific and or the Erie caboose would have come in. And so there they are.
And that's actually a Lionel set?
That's a Lionel set from an uncatalogued set from 1966.
Cool. And then underneath all this is where all the boxes are.
Yes, the boxes are all hiding in
the
the
silverfish. That's just silverfish farm.
And the acid eating them away slowly.
So, and you collect the little Alcos.
Yes,
and
I think they're colorful and neat. And so every Alco they made is on the wall by the number and the variation. There are a few sets, and again, in the early 60s where there's just duplications of stuff that I just didn't bother with.
Because it's one different car.
It's one different car, something that I already have somewhere else. And we have a space problem now as it is.
And they're not as exciting as collecting the Berkshires
Berkshire
with and without tape on the couplers.
Right. Yeah, there's probably a dozen plus early Burks over there, and a lot
So-
were very different.
Let's talk about the layout. This is the 1949.
This is a recreation of the 49 showroom layout from Manhattan. It's been done one other time, sort of complete by a club group, and I think in Jackson, Mississippi, back 35 years ago. They were very nice and sent me their drawings and plans and pictures of what they had done. And I made a lot of adjustments because I didn't think some of the things they were doing were quite perfect. I think Joe Mania has also started this project, and he started it long before me, and I don't think he's gotten very far on it. But this was, because I'd always seen this in the catalogs and magazines and pictures, I just as a kid thought this was the coolest layout.
And you made all these
I
buildings?
made all the buildings that aren't Lionel buildings.
So, and they're cardstock? And
Yep, cardstock and built similarly. They would have been built in the 50s with balsa wood and cardstock and what have you.
And then the trains aren't the 50 ones. They're just from the early 50s.
They're all vintages. But most of the trains that are on this layout would have been on that layout through 1957.
Oh,
Into 1958. So there are photographs I have of a 746 Norfolk and Western over by the station at the front on the layout. I've seen pictures of the girls' train on the layout in New York.
And there's a famous picture of a girl standing on the layout. Was it in this corner?
I
or
don't-
that
I
corner?
don't
One
know.
of these two corners.
I don't know.
Of a model that they did that.
That may have been on the pre-war layout.
Oh
Here.
yeah, which would have been T-rail.
Yeah. It would have been a
So
T-rail
what's
layout.
the size of this?
16 by 32. And I have it set at the same exact elevation that it was in New York. So people seeing this can see it exactly as you would have seen it in New York. Again, without the trains on the walls. I mean, they had a barn to put theirs in. I don't have that, but
Yeah,
I wanted this to be viewed exactly as you would have seen it 70 years ago, 75 years ago in New
Well,
York
I
City.
think the trains look better when you're looking kind of down on them.
Yep,
Because my standard gauge layout
it's
is
high, like mine.
like that, which is because I have an O gauge layout on the floor under it, and I needed that extra space.
So this is a recreation of the 49 layout, but unlike some other people who wanted it to look exactly as it looked on opening day in 1949, I've taken some liberties and made some changes here and there where maybe like these water towers would not have been there at the same time as the 115 station. They made change outs of things. I just want to make sure everything you see here, you could find a picture of it on the original layout. At one point later, after 55, this area was turned into an area where they had the 3460 Freuhoff vans where they could load them and unload them. That was the
That's all.
new thing for 1955. So they took the oil wells out and put that in. And I'm not even so sure that there was a red top oil well on that layout. I just have one and it shows the variation.
Yeah, because you're a collector.
I'm a collector, you bet.
And so you can run, what, 2 of the lower ones, and then how many?
You
on
can
top?
run 6
3?
trains on this layout. So there's 2 interurbans, the loop and then the big loop for the GG ones with the Madison cars. Then there's the loop on top, and then there are 3 loops on the bottom. We have a loop here. We have a loop here.
Start over.
Okay, we have a loop here that goes pretty much around the outside. This one almost mimics it. Then on the inside, there's another loop that just sucks into the mountain, comes in tight around the mountain.
That's where the Basco Bridge
That's
is?
where the Bascio Bridge is. That's the third lower level inner loop.
And then there's the
Upper
upper.
loop. And that changed too. So in 1949, it wasn't a dog bone like this. They had an 072 switch at one end and an 072 switch at the other, and it would do the non-derailing. But I'm sure after a year or two, they figured out that was a maintenance nightmare, and they took them out and just made it like we see it here. And I did it for the same reason. I didn't want to have to crawl up there every 3 months and fix switches.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, on my layout, everything is reachable except for 2 cross sections, which that's 90% of the time the train comes off
Yep.
there.
And when I built it, this is framed in like 2x6s like a house. 3/4 inch plywood, 2x6 construction, 4x4 legs. You can dance up there. And that's one of the other problems of it being the height it is. With the 2x6s, it's just low enough that when I try to crawl around under there, I'm about an inch too big.
You gotta suck in that
You gotta
gut.
suck in that gut. Yeah, I gotta get down low to crawl underneath there to get the stuff.
Oh yeah, there's that white switcher right there.
And it was made by All Nation, or one of the other two rail companies. It was again, 49 was before Lionel had their production 622 out.
Yeah, they're general models.
It's general models. You're right. It's not All
And
Nation.
then
It's general
the
models.
mechanism inside it was Thomas parts.
Yep. And so that's the correct general models item.
Mm-hmm. Here's Brian at the control panel. Puts his hand on the knob. You got 4 ZWs there, Brian.
That's what they had on the layout.
And
There's actually another 1 or 2 down below running other lights and things, just to not overtax them.
So are there 2 cranes?
There were 2 cranes. There's a crane here. There's a crane on the other side.
And they're both the plastic
They're both the
182s.
earlier 182s. Yep.
And you have the electronics set.
Yep.
I was going to ask where's that for that, but that.
Well, there's an
whole
electronic
was-
set over on the back there. There's 2 on the wall back here, the variations, and there's another duplicate early one.
Why is there one uncoupler by itself on the top? Is that an addition? That's
One. Oh, that's just parts. It's just laying there.
Oh,
This
okay.
is just, for whatever reason, it got set there and never, because it's black buttons. It just
Okay.
got set
And
there.
you're a
and got-
collector, so you have
I'm a
the
collector, and then
brands.
I'm also a slob, so stuff gets left around places.
Yeah. And then there's there's 3 momentary contacts, 96Cs. Those are water towers?
Those are to run like water tower spouts, or I'm not sure what they ran. I don't have all of this wired up yet. I just haven't had the time to do that.
And when did you build this layout?
This part of the building was built in 2013, 14, so 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah, it gets to the point where it's like, you
gotta,
know, what a water tower
my
looks like.
business has exploded in the last 10 years, so my time to play is limited compared to what it was 10 years ago.
This is just fantastic. And this. Look, so you mentioned the boxes earlier. These are all
There's all accessories.
accessories and separate sale boxes,
Yep.
all wedged in underneath. Now your shelves, those are just 1x4s?
1x3s.
1x3s?
Where we've run them through the table saw and, ripped a couple of grooves in for the wheels.
And are they all at the same distance?
They're all the
Same
same distance
heights?
out. Yeah, they're all the same.
So you didn't modify them based on what was going to go on the
No,
shelves?
no. In fact, there's a few places where auto loaders are a little tough to get on there, or they're very, very tight.
One of the things that you said is that you collect sets based on variations. So can you show us real quick with these generals what the differences are?
Okay, and those aren't really variations in the generals. They're just different catalog sets. So you've got an 1862 with 2 cars, which is their most basic general set. You have the 1862 with the addition of the horse car, which is again the more basic of the 027, or what by that time would be possibly O gauge, but the more basic didn't have steam, smoke unit, or a whistle or any of that.
And no magnet track.
No magnet traction. Then in 1872 general sets, now we have whistles, but they're in the passenger car. They have a light, they have smoke units and all that, and of course the Halloween general. Everybody knows about the uncataloged set.
So you just but you don't have a set with in the 1872 they come with different color smokestacks?
Nope.
Just because that's the way you got
Just
the
the way I got
sets.
them. Yeah, but I don't pursue minuscule variations like some guys. If they come, great. But I'm not just dying and going to every train meet looking, is that smokestack dark gray instead of medium gray? It's just not.
And so it gets to the point where, because to buy the different smokestacks, you're looking at $100 because you don't care about the boxes.
I don't care about boxes per se. It's just a space issue. There's only so much space. And unfortunately, I also collect pre-war and standard gauge and a whole lot of stuff.
So Brian collects by variations and sets, and now he's going to show us the 773 1950 Hudson sets.
So we have 3 sets here. One freight set, which is obviously different. The 2 passenger sets. The big difference here is the registration of the lettering. In this set, the L is directly over the end of the window. Here it is offset by about 3/8 to 1/2 inch. and that's on all the cars. So one is an early version, one is a later version of that set when they made the registration change.
And they all have.
And they all have the people in the windows, yes. And then the freight set was just the freight set. This one happens to have a black lettered stock car, and a lot of people don't know they made the black lettered stock car both in 49 and in 50.
And then all the cars.
There's no sticker on it, and the cars are standard $5 cars.
And then you have the,
like in the girls' train above it, you've got a rubber stamped heavy serif lettering font on the engine. You have a heat stamped lesser serif font on the lower engine. This is the traditional 1130T tender that came with it. This is a 6026 tender that was painted pink, I'm assuming at the factory. This came from a lady who worked at Lionel from 1957 to 63. It was hers. I got it from her through a guy in Florida. He didn't care or know the difference. I just thought that was interesting.
and the cars are all the same?
Cars are all the same.
Now, when you have these on the shelf like this as a set, do you put them up the same order as the set?
I try to put them up as they were shown in the catalog.
Okay.
I try to do that. I'm not saying every one is that way, but that's
Can
the
you
goal.
move this
Oh, here.
terrace here?
So we've got a pre-war terrace that's in our way. But if we look down in here, we can now see a 6026 tender in pink that is a factory paint prototype, and below it is a mint green 6456 Lehigh Valley hopper, also a factory prototype. That assumption is it was for the girls' train because it's in a bright color like that, pastel color.
But it's a 64.
The 6456.
Were they still making those in 57?
Oh yeah, they made that through, well, probably not through 57, no. But
They would have had.
I'm guessing they were doing prototypes in the girls' train as early as maybe 52 or 53, because of some of the things you see in some of the prototype sets, and in the boys' train and things, what they call the boys' train.
And they're always looking for.
And technically, the boys' train isn't a boys' train; it's technically an assemblage of girls' train prototypes. And I got
odd colors.
and odd colors, yeah.
So you got the 64 Hudson. So here's the 64.
So the 64 Hudson, the top set is from 64. It's the Pennsylvania tender, and it had the leftover circus cars in them. They used those up before they got the later plastic trucked Santa Fe's. And the bottom one's the New York Central, which that's how they ran it in 1965 and 66.
You know, I just saw it in Al Gazzini's book that they were going to make the poultry cars in red for that.
Well, they made the 6434 poultry car in red. That's not operating. And that's the operating poultry car. They made in brown.
So with these, what's the difference on the linkage there?
Nothing. Other than that, in the 6456, there's a little piece missing in here. That's on the 50 Hudsons. In fact, here. I guess I need to want to know. There's a. Here.
That's so much more common than pre-war.
So if you look at a 50 Hudson, the top of the steam chest has a guide that sticks out to the right, and the later ones do not.
Okay.
Other than that, the engines are pretty identical. There's not a lot of difference.
And the number's bigger.
And the number is bigger on the other one. It's white rubber stamped instead of silver.